Fifth Work LLC.
Ah, all right, cool. The YouTube is live, so I'm gonna share the link to the YouTube
It just
for
came up,
those
sorry.
who are not catching it clearly. Nino, do you mind sharing it on the WhatsApp? Because I have so many screens here.
I don't know if I have it.
No, let me
I saw
just
someone post
drop
it
it.
last time.
I've just dropped it in the chat. Yo, guys, listen, yeah. I just want to benchmark who we have in the room today. I'm not taking a register or anything like that. I just want to find out, and you can literally unmute your mics. I just want to hear how many devs are in the house, like if you're a developer or if you're a noob, like I just want to see, measure the room right now. So just if you're shy, you can drop in a chat, something in the message and just be like, developer or N for newbie, and then we'll see what's up. Let's fire it up, guys. Fire it up.
Thank you.
Okay, newbie. Okay, Ande.
There we
OG,
go.
Paul Makolaka. That's my boy. Yo, Paulo, vipi Buddha?
I'm doing great, man.
Ah, Safi, Safi. Yo, Nino, that's Paul, Abia University, Kenya, one of our partners. Yo, Paul, big up yourself, man.
I
Um,
I really enjoyed yesterday. It was
yeah, you're
lit.
gonna.
It was lit.
Good.
Yo, Paul,
Yeah.
this is gonna be literally the best 2 weeks, 10 days of your
Yeah.
life. Like
Yeah,
this,
sure,
this is
man.
the best 10 days of everybody's lives, you know what I mean? Yo, Shanika, big up yourself. You're a newbie, but we got you. Let's see.
We
Almara,
got
developer, Joel, newbie, Benita, newbie,
Francis,
Marcella, product
developer.
designer. Okay. Yo, Chris,
Alamara.
you there, yeah?
Yeah, I'm here.
So you're seeing how the room's looking, right?
Yeah, we got a mixed bag, which is
All
good.
right, cool. That's
Mhm.
cool. Yo, so guys, without wasting
Hello.
further time, we've reached where we wanted to reach. We have at least 60 people in the room. And guys, let me promise you, this thing is not about quantity, it's about quality. I told you yesterday, we had about 3,000 applicants. We whittled down to 600 registered people. And yesterday we had about 200 people in the room. Today, I don't know how many people are going to show up. Already we have 60, might be more, might be just you guys. Don't focus on quantity, focus on quality and what you want to do moving forward. Because after this stage, we have a summer hackathon coming up, and we're going to have Chris and the crew holding it down. And then after that, we're going to have Electric Dreams featuring uh, the aquarium residency in Paris. So don't think about don't have a group mentality. It's a good mentality to have, like in terms of community, but when you're here, you're on a solo mission here, all right? So just focus on you and focus on learning. So David, I'm gonna unpin you. Yo, my Kenyan bros, we're gonna catch up later. We can catch up in the chat or in the WhatsApp. Chris, I'm gonna hand it over to you. But before then, Nino, as course director. Is our Evan joining today?
I can ask.
Yeah, and then you want to say something really quick before we start?
I don't know how many people were here yesterday. Can you hear me? Everything's good?
Yeah, I hear you,
Okay.
Nino.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know who we had with us yesterday. I mean, it seems like a lot of the students jump in and out. A lot of people join us from YouTube, so we won't actually be able to interact with them, which is unfortunate that they have these network problems with a lot of our students. But it is what it is. I mean, keep trucking, like keep joining, learn as much as you can, grab as much as you can, network as much as possible. I see a full stack dev in the chat. If you've got a product worth building, it's a good contact to have. Just save that one. But again, this is all about community. It's all about bringing people together, learning what we can, seeing if we can find a solution to the problems in your community. Again, no strings attached. Your IP is your own. If you have a good idea, keep it. It is safe with Brian or I, but please don't share it with anybody else. I mean, we'll go on record that we're not going to steal your stuff. It's your idea. That's no
Yeah.
problem. But again, please don't trust everybody. We don't
Yeah.
know. We can only filter the registrations as much as possible. But again, I really do appreciate you all coming out here, putting through the effort. We've had pretty good numbers with previous cohorts. And welcome. Let's hand it
Yeah.
over to the professional and let's all learn
Yeah.
something together.
And just one thing before Chris takes over. These people have been asking me about certificates. We are going to mint for you NFT certificates at the end of it, okay? Because the ideathon is going to be one of those benchmarks that we'll be using to see who's going to get an outstanding certificate or just a regular attendance certificate. So put your best foot forward and let's kill it. Yo,
Yeah.
Chris, over to you.
Great. Can you give me co-host then so I can share my screen?
Yeah, just give me 1 second there, mate.
All right, it was cold here, so I had the beanie on.
All right, Chris, there you go.
Okay.
Nino, you have co-host as well if you want to record it locally, but you have co-host as well.
I'm here to learn. I'm just gonna listen.
All right, cool, chill, bro.
Okay. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Great. Right. Let's get cracking then. So, well, thanks for everyone for tuning in. My name's Chris Dangerfield, and I'm going to be the instructor for your lecture today, which is titled XRP Ledger Fundamentals. And essentially what I aim to do is give you a top level overview today of the XRP Ledger. And I've got two primary goals. The first is to get you thinking about what you can build. The first is to think about what I can get you to build on top of the XRP Ledger. And the second is to demonstrate that for any competent developer, building on the XRP Ledger is actually really simple. I want that to be a message that you take away with you today. I'll also be running a second lecture, which is scheduled for the 2nd of April. And in that lecture, we're going to get a little bit more technical, dive into a lot more code. But today, especially given the variety of different people in the audience, the lecture is aimed really at a much wider range of participants. It's not just aimed at developers, so there will be something for everyone. And devs are great, right? But building a successful business does go beyond raw coding skills. It's going to require an idea, and it's going to need people with drive and passion to make that vision a reality. And in my own experiences, developers, they need some help with this sort of stuff. So, sometimes it's someone that's experienced a problem and they can see a solution, but they just don't know how to make it a reality. And other times, it's just someone entrepreneurial with a vision. But in my experience, the flip side is that there's often a lack of knowledge about what's actually possible. And to anyone that's interested in building on a blockchain, any blockchain really, you first need to understand its features and its limitations. So today I'm going to concentrate on giving you an introduction to the XRP ledger. And my hope is that this is going to set you on a journey of thinking about the cool stuff that you could go on to build. So before we dig into the XRPL, I have been asked by those organising this course and also by XRPL Commons, who you'll also, I'm sure, hear more about over the next week or so. They've asked me to share a little bit about myself as your sort of lecturer today, why I'm here, and that's what I'm going to quickly do. So I've put together, if you can see, a brief outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start with essentially just a little bit about me, just so you can get a feel for who I am and why I'm here today. So I am an independent developer, senior developer, and I've been developing for over 30 years in the software development field. And before I sort of like got into Web3, I worked as a full stack engineer. I've written many different types of software for a wide range of different companies, from small man one operation to high profile, world respected brands. And I've also run a number of companies myself, which gives me sort of first-hand experience in both the technical and business aspects of software development. Now, over the last 8 years or so, I've been getting more deeply involved with Web3 and primarily focusing on the XRP Ledger. My work includes developing projects on the XRPL for all manner of different things. I've worked on a decentralized ticketing protocol. I've worked on and consulted on the build of a metaverse that's built directly on the XRP Ledger. And I've also contributed to a number of different open source tools. In addition to projects, I've also co-authored 4 XLS proposals to improve the core protocol. Now, we haven't really got to the point where you're likely to understand what that means yet. So for now, you can just think of it as me writing a specification for a new feature in Windows, where the XRP Ledger is Windows, and I'm essentially adding support for a new feature, such as a firewall. Additionally, I'm actively working on several new projects that are going to take advantage of these new features once the amendments are fully implemented. And finally, I have a real passion for growing the XRP Ledger development community through education, which is why I was so pleased to have been asked to speak to all you future Web3 builders today. So just going to quickly talk very quickly about my role in the XRP Ledger education. As an independent consultant, I work in partnership with XRPL Commons to enhance educational resources for the XRP Ledger. One of my focuses is on empowering more participants to enter the XRPL ecosystem, because by increasing people's knowledge, we can drive innovation, expand adoption, and we can unlock new potential use cases for the XRPL. I believe that any blockchain ecosystem, in order for it to thrive, it needs more developers building real-world applications. And that is why I authored the complete XRP Ledger Developer Bootcamp course, which is on Udemy. It's a comprehensive course designed to take developers from essentially zero to building real-world applications on the XRPL. So if you are serious about learning more about XRP Ledger development, I'd highly recommend you take that course. It's going to cover many important aspects of the XRPL in far greater detail than I can possibly hope to sort of cram into this short lecture today.
How many hours would it take to get through that?
About 6.
About 6 hours.
6 to 7. Yeah. So a question that I am often asked is how I got started in blockchain. So I first learned about Bitcoin in 2012. But I didn't really pay enough attention at the time. I mean, I wish I did, but I didn't. And I didn't really recognize its significance. It's a decision that with hindsight has proven to be quite a costly mistake. But ultimately, in 2016, I came across the XRP Ledger and actually got into it by investing a small amount of money. And when that investment actually grew, it piqued my interest. And so I just wanted to lean in to understand more about the technology behind it. So naturally, being a developer, I was more interested in what I could actually build using this technology, beyond simple payments. And I was encouraged actually by a friend of mine. His name is Wind. He's based in the Netherlands, and he's the founder of XRPL Labs, which is a name that if you do get into the XRP Ledger, you will definitely trip over at some point. And he basically pushed me to have a go. It's through him that I ever heard the phrase "mess around and find out." Although, to be honest, his version started with an F, so I'll let you figure out what that stands for. But essentially, jump in was his message. Anyway, back then, concepts like NFTs and smart contracts, they weren't really a thing. And that just made the XRPL's capabilities just more intriguing to me to explore. For example, did you know that the XRP Ledger was the first blockchain to have its own native decentralized exchange built into the core protocol? And that the XRP Ledger was also the first blockchain to properly support the concept of an issued asset. which is something that we would today refer to as a token, like a USD or some other form of tokenized value. And one thing that I would therefore encourage all of you to do is mess around and find out. Don't wait, just jump in and have a go. You know, back when I started, the documentation was actually not very good. It was quite poor. So today, you are all pretty spoiled. There's some great resources available. There's nothing really to stop you from jumping in and having a go. You just need to be prepared to make the jump. You know, despite the challenges that I faced, I saw the potential in the XRPL and I just started building on it. And I was surprised just by how easy it was. And hopefully this is a key message I'm going to get across to you all today. It really is easy to get going. So the big question is why you should all look to explore the XRP Ledger. You know, today the XRPL offers powerful, fast and low cost scalable blockchain that supports a variety of use cases from payments to tokenization, decentralized finance, NFTs, and it's also got a vibrant core development community that's always proposing new features, such as we have a loans protocol coming, new features for identity, credentials management, smart contracts, a whole raft of things. And so my goal today is to just help you understand its full potential and get you thinking about what you can build. So I want to get started. Enough about me. Let's do what I said. Let's jump in. I said that one of my goals is to basically demonstrate how easy it is to build on top of the ledger. So before we get into sort of like the necessary theory of today's lecture, I want to show you a very simple Hello World app where we're going to connect to the ledger and then essentially display the last validated index. If you're wondering what that means, essentially you can just think of that as being a unique identifier, just allows you to pinpoint a specific point in time on the ledger's history. Now, I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen and I'm going to jump into VS Code. So bear with me while I make that change. Hopefully you can all see my VS Code window now. So VS Code is the IDE that I use and I favor, but you know, you can use any editor you like because what you're going to see in a moment is we're only really writing JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is going to create a new file. From the extension, you'll see we're going to be working with JavaScript. So if you do want to follow along, you're going to have Node installed on your machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just initialize this. And I am going to import basically the XRPL SDK for JavaScript. So that's dead simple. We're just going to npm i XRPL. And that's going to bring us in the SDK. And then we're going to write some code. Now, this is dead simple. It's the simplest example I can come up with. But the important thing to note is that once you follow this and once you get it, you'll see that actually writing more complex stuff doesn't really break the fundamental principles you're going to learn here right now. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in the SDK. And right, next thing I want to do is I'm going to call a function to display last ledger index. Okay. So naturally I'm going to want to create that. So display last ledger index, yeah. Helpful. So just gonna finish that off. Now, inside this function, what we're going to do is we're just going to console log. So I'm going to just console log. Hello world. Yeah, it's the curse of doing things live. Hello, hello world. Incidentally, if anybody wants to follow along, the all of this is going to be on a Git repo, so you can go at a later point and actually grab that if you want. Actually, I'm just gonna use backticks because I'm
I do
gonna.
want to say for everyone paying attention, if you're not a developer, don't be intimidated by this. It's you don't have to build your own platform. Simply watch along, learn what it can do, and just have these thoughts in your mind when you if you're not a developer, somewhere in the along the way, you'll find someone who does this all day and they know exactly what's happening. So I just don't want you to be discouraged and leave prematurely and miss out on the rest of the
Yeah.
classes.
Incidentally, this bit is just to appease the developers that are going to be sitting down in a minute thinking, where's VS Code? I want to see code. I want to see code. But, there is going to be some theory which everybody's going to need to know. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you could be a developer that's as experienced as I am, you still need to know the theory in order to be able to build. But once you've got through that, you're going to find the building is actually really simple. And another really interesting thing is, as I type this, because I have Copilot installed in VS Code, it's second guessing half the bloody code I'm writing for you right now. So, technically the AI is would write most of this for you anyway. So anyway, where are we? So what we've got now is a function that's basically in a console log out, and in a minute, we'll come back and we'll update the code to insert the extra code. So what we're going to want to do is we are going to connect to the ledger. So we're going to create a simple variable just to basically hold that. And I'm going to do new, and I'm pulling from the XRPL SDK, and I'm calling client, which is a method on that SDK. Now, I'm not going to use the testnet. I'm actually going to connect directly to the live mainnet here. So I'm going to connect to the XRPL cluster. And what that's basically going to do is set us up with the address of basically a public infrastructure that you can connect to. And then we are going to just do a simple await. And we're going to do client.connect. So what we're basically doing now is we're just saying that's the client, connect to it. Okay, so one thing which we should do, which is just good practice, is we should close off any connections after we've used them. So we'll just do client.disconnect at the end of the script. Now, with this client that's now essentially open, we're going to just send a simple command to the XRP ledger. And what we're going to do is we're just basically going to ask it to give us the last ledger index. So you can see the AI is already predicting what I'm going to do from the context. So I am going to just do const ledger index. I'm going to wait, but I'm going to do client.request. And I'm just going to pass in an object. Okay, now you can let's ignore that. So I only have to pass in two things in order to make this work. I need to pass in a command, and I'm going to pass in ledger. And I'm going to pass in the ledger index. And I'm going to ask for the validated ledger. Now, a little bit later on, I'm going to explain what this means, what validated means. It essentially is just the state. So what I'm asking it for is the last validated XRPL ledger. So the last thing we need to do is just come in and update the console log. So I know that ledger index is going to contain my my piece of data they want. So what I'll do is this placeholder here, I'm just going to replace that now. And I'm going to call ledger index, and I'm going to get it from result dot ledger index. And that's it. It's not a lot of code. Let's pull this down a bit. Not a lot of code, but you can see that's all it takes. So before I actually run it, I'm very quickly going to talk you through what we're doing. So we're importing the SDK. Then we're going to be ultimately calling a function. That function is going to connect to the XRPL cluster, which is basically that is the XRP Ledger mainnet. And when it's connected, it's going to send in a simple command. This is no different to, an API you may use for something like Stripe. Okay, you're just going to pass in a JSON object with what you want, And we are going to get a result. And then we're going to take that result and console log it if I actually don't make a mistake there. Oh, I'm glad I caught that. Okay, so assuming I haven't made any other typos, if I run this code, it should work. So we will just find out. And what we should get is a console log with the latest index. So I'm going to run app.js and fingers crossed. And there we go. Simple as that. Very fast. And it brings us the last index. And this is the last ledger index for the mainnet. So that's running right live now. If I run it again, we would now get a different number because it just goes up sequentially. I hope that for any dev that's watching, you think, oh my God, that's dead simple. And for anybody that's not a developer, hopefully I've explained it enough that you are able to kind of just see that this stuff is not rocket science. Okay. So anyway, the goal was to just make that point to you. Building on the XRP ledger was actually very simple. And when you get into more and more complicated stuff, most of it is going to follow this principle, creating a connection to the ledger, asking it either for some information or you want to form some kind of transaction, posting that data in, getting a result back, doing something with it. That's it. That's pretty much all it really is. But I'm going to get into all of that a little bit more as we progress today. But anyway, hopefully I've made the point and you all you will get it. It really is. It's one of those things that when you first think about building on any kind of blockchain, in my own experience with the XRPL, it sort of feels daunting. It's this new complex technology. It's going to change the world. But it changed the world, it may well do, but complex it is not. So if you've ever successfully integrated Stripe or something else like that, you're going to find building on the XRP Ledger is actually not much more difficult. Anyway, that's the bit I wanted to show to get out the way in terms of just demonstrating how easy it is to actually use code. What I'm going to do is go back now to the slides, which I hope is this screen. Yeah. So jump in. Don't wait. If you're a dev, just jump in. The XRPL docs are really good. All the code I've just shown you there is already on a GitHub. The address is on the screen now, and give you a few seconds to just make a note of that if you want it. And then I'm going to move on, and then we're going to start getting into the meat of today's lecture, which is essentially starting with an overview of the XRP ledger. Okay, so let's turn that off. So, okay, hopefully you're all seeing the slides again. So I'm going to take time to look at a quick top level overview of the XRP ledger, and I'm going to try and rattle through this relatively quickly because there's a lot of information to give, and I'm conscious that we have a relatively short amount of time. However, I've been told this is going to be recorded, so if I do go a bit fast, maybe you'll have to go back and rewatch any sections. So the XRP Ledger is a fully decentralized blockchain, and it was launched in 2012. There are over 800 XRPL nodes that are currently processing transactions and maintaining the XRPL. There's also over 200 validators, and that's actually a pretty impressive statistic considering that there's actually no on-chain incentive for running infrastructure. People run these validators because they want to contribute to the network. They want it to be reliable, robust, and decentralized. And infrastructure providers are from all walks of life. So from developers and inspiring project owners like yourself to businesses, exchanges, and universities. The XRP ledger is a fixed function ledger. So the best way to explain that is to think of it as a simple set of API functions that do very specific things. It's extremely efficient, but it does have some limitations. Essentially, the XRPL has no smart contract capability, so its functionality is fixed. The developer cannot extend it with the use of a smart contract, at least not without an amendment, which is something that we're going to learn about later on. At the last count, where are we? 2000 actually. At the last count, There were over 2,000 different apps, websites, and exchanges connected to the mainnet, all built by a diverse group of developers from all around the world. And there are a wide-ranging number of contributors, wallet providers, custody, compliance, security, infrastructure, tooling. We've also got a growing number of gaming projects, metaverse projects, all building their products on the XRP Ledger. And we've also got marketplaces, DEXs, RWA platforms, and also new DeFi protocols being built out. We've got contributors from all over the world that develop to the core ledger itself. And we've got educational resources as well. And lastly, financial players providing payment solutions, stablecoin issuance, and a whole lot more. So in summary, the XRPL ecosystem is vast, and it's also pretty varied. As of today, we're closing in on 3 billion transactions processed on the XRPL since its launch in 2012. And the XRP Ledger is capable of processing in excess of 1,500 transactions per ledger. But the average is usually between 50 and 200. It's also noteworthy to say that not all blockchain metrics are created equally. So, for example, comparing the TPS of Solana with XRPL is in no way a fair comparison, just simply due to the way in which they calculate TPS. So when the XRP Ledger refers to TPS, it's actually referring to the number of transactions processed in a single ledger. I call it ledger because in XRPL parlance, we don't call it a block, we call it a ledger. And those ledgers occur roughly every 3 to 4 seconds. Market capitalization of the XRPL at the moment, the native asset on the XRPL, it's around 150 billion, but obviously that does fluctuate day to day. And as at the moment, it is currently the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap. And interestingly, it's also got a whopping 5 million activated accounts, which is again often misunderstood. Having an active account on the XRP Ledger requires you to lock up some real tangible value. You know, accounts are not free like they are on other blockchains, so people don't just create them and throw them away. Owning an account started off as requiring 20 XRP to be locked for an active account, and that number has fallen over time in line with the increasing price of XRP. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the XRPL. What I want to do now is play you a short 3-minute video from my Udemy course. And the reason is because I'm going to show you a video that basically said, what is the XRP Ledger? And this is an extremely distinct, also extremely succinct way of answering that question. So I have shared the audio, but if you don't hear anything, somebody please let me know. What is the XRP Ledger? The XRP Ledger is a decentralized, permissionless, open source blockchain that anyone can contribute to, develop on, and transact on. Proven reliable over more than a decade of error-free functioning, the XRPL offers streamlined development, low transaction costs, high performance, and sustainability. Let's unpack both statements and dig into them in a little more detail. Decentralized, meaning no single entity has control. A global network of over 100 validators confirm transactions, ensuring security and trust. Permissionless, meaning anyone can participate in the network without requiring approval. Open source. The XRP Ledger codebase is fully open source, providing transparency and allowing anyone to review or contribute towards its code. Reliable. The XRP Ledger has over a decade of continuous uptime and has closed more than 80 million ledgers and processed over 2.5 billion transactions since launch. Streamlined development. The Xrp Ledger offers developer-friendly features like a straightforward API and SDKs, making it easy to build applications on the network. Low transaction costs. The Xrp Ledger is renowned in the blockchain world for its low-cost transactions, which are on average measured in fractions of a cent. High performance. The Xrp Ledger has extremely fast transaction confirmation times, typically around 3 to 5 seconds, and can handle up to 3,400 transactions per second. Sustainability. The Xrp Ledger's consensus mechanism is extremely energy efficient, approximately 61,000 times more energy efficient than a proof-of-work blockchain like Bitcoin, giving credibility to its claim of being a truly sustainable blockchain. This is nothing more than a summary. Don't worry if any of the concepts mentioned here are alien to you at this point. We're going to dig into these concepts and many more in much more detail throughout this course. Okay, so right. That's a very, very short video from the Udemy course that I have produced, and it was just, I felt playing you that was a lot better than me trying to describe it to you. Now, history. And I genuinely wish we had the time to dig into the history because it's actually fascinating. But, unfortunately, there's just not enough time to really dig into that today. And if you are interested in learning more about the history of the Xrp Ledger, then there is a full module on that on the Udemy course. It's pretty interesting stuff. So if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about who built it, what their goals were and how it's evolved over the last decade or so, then that particular one will be of interest to you. And it's probably not the last time that I'm going to point you to the Udemy course either, or other external resources for learning for that matter. Essentially, I'm trying to squeeze what really should be about three and a half hours worth of content into 90 minutes. I'm having to skip over certain things. So the Udemy course will sort of fill in the gaps. So with that in mind, I'd like to just pause for 1 minute and just say that today, if anybody's interested in that course, I'm going to provide an exclusive discount for anybody that wants to take the course. Today, we're going to provide you with a good start, but there's still going to be plenty more for you to learn. For example, we're not going to have the time to touch on infrastructure. And if you're going to run your own project, that's something you're going to need to understand and probably want to participate in. And also in the course, you'll also build a full working XRP wallet using React. And importantly, there's lectures in the course that will pad out the information that I'm going to give you today. And if not, it's going to help to, at the very minimum, reinforce what I'm telling you. So if you're interested in this particular course and you want to take it, it's usually £55, which is around $70 US. I'm giving a discount code today, which will bring that down to $11.99, and it'll be valid for 4 days. And let's see, did I put it up there? Yeah, I did. So everything you need to know is on your screen right now. It works out as a pretty decent discount. The code you would need to use is just XRPL365. You enter that at checkout, it'll drop the price right down. The code is also my Twitter handle. So if you are, if you're interested in learning more about the XRPL and you'd like to contact me, I'm always happy to try and help anyone that genuinely wants to learn more and develop on the XRPL. So follow me on Twitter. That's the best way to contact me. I'm always on there and I will answer your DMs if you send me. Also, there's a vibrant XRP community on Twitter. So, come and join a space, promote your project, meet new people, and maybe you'll be able to expand your team or find a way to fund your idea. Right, I'm going to move on now to the features of the XRPL. We're going to take a quick look at what they are. This is particularly important information now because, as I said at the very start, at the top of the lecture, there's often a lack of understanding of what blockchains can do, what you should use them for, what you shouldn't use them for. And you can't build any product unless you understand the technology that you're going to build on. And you don't have to be a developer to understand this. This is just basic fundamental knowledge of the types of things that you can do. So on your screen, there is a bunch of different essentially features of the XRPL, and I'm going to run through each of them. I've got no more than a couple of sentences on each of them, but I'm going to run you through them. And if there are any questions over that, we can go over that at the end of the lecture. So starting at the top, payments. Payment transactions essentially form the backbone of the XRP ledger. They allow users to transfer XRP or other assets from one account to another with high speed and security. These transactions typically process within 3 to 5 seconds, and the XRP ledger ensures transaction finality, meaning once confirmed, the transactions are irreversible, providing a reliable method for moving value. Issued assets. The XRPL allows users to issue custom assets that represent different forms of value, from traditional currencies to tokens representing ownership in real-world assets. These issued assets can be sent, received, and traded just like XRP, making the XRP Ledger a versatile platform for various applications, including tokenization and asset management. We have a feature called payment channels. Now, payment channels introduce an off-chain mechanism for conducting a series of transactions without broadcasting each one to the public ledger. This reduces transaction fees and speeds up microtransactions, making it suitable for use cases like micropayments, gaming, and content subscriptions. They're actually a really interesting feature, and I'm only giving you a very brief summary here of all of these things. The documentation on xrpl.org for all this stuff is excellent and absolutely worth a read. Escrows, right. Escrows are baked into the XRP Ledger protocol. You don't need a smart contract. You don't have to build anything yourself. The functionality is basically there. It's, as I said, it's a fixed function ledger. An escrow is baked in functionality that's essentially built for you and proven to be solid now for a very long time. An escrow is essentially going to enable you or essentially your users to securely lock up XRP until either a specific condition is met with a predefined period or just a period of time has elapsed. Once the escrow is unlocked, the XRP will either be sent to its destination or returned. Currently, escrow functionality only supports the native XRP asset, but there is an amendment which, if passed, would allow the escrow of other assets. And that amendment is actually pretty far along now, so it wouldn't surprise me if that doesn't go live within the next 3 to 6 months. NFTs. Yes, we have NFTs on the XRPL. It's amazing how many people don't know that we do, but we do. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, an NFT is essentially just a unique, indivisible asset. It's representing ownership or proof of authenticity in a specific asset. And unlike cryptocurrencies, each NFT is distinct and it cannot be exchanged on a one-to-one basis. The NFT functionality has been live now for around 2 years, 2.5 years. And there's a new amendment currently up for voting, which will bring a new feature to them. Essentially, they will become dynamic NFTs, which is going to open up a whole range of new potential use cases. Dynamic NFTs can actually be played around now on the DevNet if you're interested. We've got a feature called checks. Checks are a feature that represent deferred payments on the XRP ledger. A user can create a check which represents a promise to pay an amount of XRP to the destination account with a specified future expiry date. These checks must be cashed by the recipient before they expire using essentially a separate transaction to claim. Tickets. Right, tickets enable users to reserve space on the XRP ledger for future transactions. This feature ensures that transactions are processed promptly. even during periods of high network congestion. Users can purchase tickets and attach them to their transactions, prioritizing the processing and reducing the risk of delays. Tickets are a fairly advanced concept on the XRPL, and it won't be until you start to understand account sequencing and transaction sequencing that it makes sense. But it's important for you to know that essentially every transaction follows a sequence, and tickets are the only way in which you can move out of sequence. But it's a rabbit hole that at some point, if you get into this, you're likely to go down. But for now, they're a really cool feature to have, and just know that they're going to give you some additional flexibility when it comes to getting the transactions you want in the order you want them. Trust lines. Right, trust lines are a unique feature of the XRP Ledger that allows users to establish trust relationships with other accounts. By setting up trust lines, individuals or entities can basically send or receive assets issued by another party on the ledger. Trust lines are an essential component to issued assets because it's the trust between the two parties that enables the asset exchange. Distributed exchange, or DEX. So the XRP Ledger hosts a decentralized exchange where users can trade XRP and other issued assets. And I think I said at the beginning, at the very beginning of today's lecture, it's quite interesting that the XRP Ledger was the first blockchain to have its own DEX, and it is native to the XRP Ledger. So it's not generated with some kind of add-on smart contract functionality. It is built directly into the XRP Ledger, and the existence of that DEX opens the XRP up to some really interesting use cases. And if you're interested in DeFi and AMMs and stuff like that, it is an amazing feature to have natively at the protocol level. Well, I want to talk about multi-signature. So multi-sig, if you're into blockchain, it's probably a concept you've heard before. It enhances the security of an account by requiring multiple signatures to authorize transactions. So on the XRPL, you can set up to 32 signers, and you can configure different weights to create your own robust security profile however you want. It's really flexible, and it is sort of the gold standard of security for an account on the XRPL. Pathfinding. Now, pathfinding is an awesome feature. Essentially, it optimizes the routing of payments on or transactions on the XRPL. It enables for cross-currency payments by connecting sender and receiver through orders in the XRPL's DEX. A single payment transaction in the XRP Ledger can use multiple paths, and it can combine liquidity from different sources to deliver the desired amount. So I could buy my cup of coffee and I could use XRP as my preferred currency. The vendor may want to be accepting USD, but the best direct path may not be XRP to USD. There may be a cheaper route for me to use my XRP to buy a euro or some other currency and have that trade into USD. And all of this happens automatically when you use pathfinding on the ledger, and all within the space of the 3-second consensus window. It is an awesome feature, and I think there's going to be when you start digging into it, I think a lot of people will get quite excited about what it does and how easy it is to actually use. The next few are actually things that are relatively new. They're updated. I've had to update elements of my course as a result of this. So let's just talk about oracles. These were introduced by a proposal called XLS 47, enabling essentially decentralized method for securely publishing and consuming price data on chain. It allows trusted entities known as oracles to submit price information for various assets, which can then be referenced in transactions. This reduces the dependency on centralized data sources and enhances data reliability. To ensure accurate pricing, multiple oracles can provide price updates, and the system can analyze these submissions and determine a reliable market value. It's particularly important for DeFi applications, AMMs, and lending protocols that are coming for the XRPL, just helping them to access consistent and trust minimized price information directly on Ledger. The AMM is probably one of the more major enhancements that have been made to the XRPL over the last 12 months. So we now have an on-chain automated market maker, which enhances liquidity and trading efficiency within the decentralized exchange. Each AMM manages a pool of 2 assets, allowing users to seamlessly swap between them at rates determined by a mathematical formula. This integration enables liquidity providers to deposit assets into these pools and receive LP tokens, or liquidity provider tokens, representing their share in the pool, allowing them to reclaim their assets. The AMM synergy with the existing order-based DEX ensures optimal trading paths, automatically combining offers and AMM liquidity to secure the best exchange rate for users. DIDs are decentralized identity. This support was also recently added. It's a framework essentially for creating and managing decentralized identifiers on the XRP ledger, and it fully aligns with the W3C standard for DIDs. This framework empowers users to generate unique, verifiable identities without relying on centralized authorities, and each DID is associated with a DID document containing essential information. On the XRPL, DIDs can be linked to their corresponding documents through various methods. And this decentralized approach ensures that users have got full control over their identities, enhancing privacy and security in digital interactions. Credentials are a proposal at the moment, although I'm fairly confident this is a feature that we will likely see relatively soon. Currently up for voting, so it's likely to be not too many months before we get our decision on that. Essentially, it establishes a framework for managing verifiable credentials that can be used for authorization and compliance within the XRPL ecosystem. So if this is approved, the amendment will enable entities to issue, accept, and revoke credentials directly on the ledger, allowing for a variety of new use cases such as pre-approval of incoming payments and enhanced security controls. The goal is to streamline transaction authorization, reduce manual verification efforts, and improve regulatory compliance. And if you're interested in this, you can play around with that now on the DevNet. It's fully documented on xrpl.org, and it's actually a great transaction type that you may want to consider for an upcoming hackathon. Then we have multi-purpose tokens. These are something that I also think will come fairly soon to the XRPL, and they bring with them a new class of fungible token, aims to enhance scalability, efficiency, and security for asset tokenization. Multi-purpose tokens streamline token management by reducing storage requirements and simplifying balance representations. This makes them particularly suitable for institutional applications like stablecoins. Key features include authorization controls, clawback mechanisms, and on-chain metadata storage, which collectively bolster compliance and flexibility. Sidechains. And also I've rolled into this future features. Right, a sidechain, personally, I think sidechains are brilliant, and as of yet, most people haven't realized their true value. But essentially, a sidechain is a separate network that runs in parallel to the main network. The first implementation of an XRPL sidechain was in 2023 with the launch of a network called Zahao. The Zahao network shares essentially a common code ancestry, but it's got changes and enhancements that the XRPL doesn't have, and the most notable one is Zahao has smart contract functionality. It also has other things like issued asset escrowing, and it's got a new lighter weight NFT protocol. There are plans for other sidechains to be launched in the future, and the big one is the Xrp Ledger EVM sidechain, which essentially will bring EVM support to the ecosystem. So but it will be using XRP as its native asset. I'd strongly suggest you give both of these a look, particularly if you're looking at alternatives, as they can provide smart contract functionality, which as of today is not something that the XRPL has. And so that's it. That's the end of my notes. That's the end of the slide. I hope this has given you a quick overview as to the main features, or I should say the fixed functions of the XRPL. This is by no means an exhaustive list, though. The idea is just to give you a flavor of what the XRPL has to offer you.
Chris,
Yeah.
before you proceed, there's a really interesting question here from Maka Yusuf in
Okay.
Nigeria. Yo, Maka Yusuf, pick up yourself and Ramadan Karim. So Maka Yusuf is asking if NFTs are usually created with smart contracts, why does XRP Ledger support NFTs but not smart contracts?
Well, you have to understand that the XRP ledger is just one big, massive smart contract. Okay. Ultimately, all a smart contract is basically a function taking some data, perform some logic, do some action, return a result. Right. You could choose to consider the XRP ledger's escrow function as a smart contract. So I think what he's getting at is that essentially when you want to create a new piece of functionality with something like Ethereum, you would create your own smart contract and then you add that functionality that you've written yourself and that executes on the chain. The XRPL fundamentally works differently. Those functions that you want to have work on the chain essentially get built for you by the core development team, and that's the amendment process, which is going to be coming up in the next sort of like section. Essentially, if you had an idea for a new feature for the XRPL, the way it would work is that you would propose an amendment to the XRPL, and then eventually that function will go live on the XRPL and everybody would get the benefit of that change that you've added.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Maka, I hope your question has been answered. Anybody with a question, just drop it in the chat and then I'm going to read them out. Chris, there's another question from Paul Makolaka. He's like, I was also wondering, how do you run your dApps without smart contracts?
Well, because the essentially it depends on what your dApp does, obviously. Generally speaking, you're going to have your application layer is going to have a lot of logic relatively specific to your application. You only interact with the XRP ledger when you want to read something from it or you want to perform a specific transaction on it. So in the case of an NFT, all you would do is your dApp is essentially going to take in the information you need to put into the NFT, set the metadata or whatever you're going to put in there. And when it's ready, it broadcasts that to the XRPL for you. It's genuinely not much more difficult to mint an NFT on the XRPL than what I showed you earlier with the Holo World. It's probably an extra 15 lines of code, and you've essentially minted a XRPL NFT, and they all then essentially conform to the exact same standard in terms of the structure of that NFT.
All right, Chris.
I think a lot of this is probably going to come. If you come from a blockchain like Ethereum background, the XRPL is a mind shift. You can do a lot of stuff with the XRPL, but you just have to think about things in a slightly different way.
Okay. Chris, so I'm just going to read two more and then you can proceed here. You can use it as an intermission, essentially.
Okay.
So another one from Maka Yusuf, and probably this goes towards governance, but I'm not sure. He's like, if you have to contact the core team,
Yeah.
will that not cause delay in rollout of the technology and innovation of the XRP ledger?
Right. I didn't quite understand the question.
Maka Yusuf, do you just want to unmute yourself and ask this question in a more clear manner, please?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, when I asked the first question, he mentioned that if you are going to make some new features using the smart contracts, you're using the NFTs, as I asked earlier. So he mentioned that you have to contact the core team if you have some features that you need to be added onto the XRP ledger so that it will be so that everybody will be beneficial, so that everybody will benefit from what you actually asked about or the innovation that you are going to bring. So my question is, if you have to contact the core team for some features to be added onto the XRP ledger, would that not cause delays? Like in the matter of the Ethereum, you'll be able to create it yourself and upload it onto the blockchain. So I think I was just asking, so would that not cause delay if you want to roll out the technology as fast so that people will be able to use it as fast? If the core team have to approve your innovations or the technology that you're bringing, will that not cause a bit of a delay in disseminating the technology that you're bringing onto the SRP?
Yeah, I got you now. And I thank you for the question because it's a brilliant question. There are a couple of things to say. The first is that I can't sit here and say that the speed at which you would do it on the XRPL would be as fast as any blockchain that has smart contracts, because the truth is that when you are building a smart contract, you are the person building it, you are the person deploying it, and as soon as you've deployed it, it's usable. Okay. That's great from the perspective of speed and you rolling your products out faster. However, there are negatives around that, and one obvious one is the amount of people that have their wallet drained because they installed a smart contract that did something that they didn't expect it to do. The XRP Ledger doesn't have that risk because essentially all of the features that get added go through a series of checks and balances where the code is reviewed by multiple people before it makes it into the network. Now, when it comes to the actual adding of features to the network, this is quite an important point, and I can use myself as an example, right? I'm building a product with another developer, and we need a new feature on the XRPL to make our product work. But we haven't had to go and find this mystical dev core team and ask them, please, can you add this feature to the XRPL? We've built the feature ourselves. Okay, the XRPL is open source, which means that we can essentially fork it and we can make our own change, and then we can essentially put a pull request in to have our code merged into the XRPL. We did that. Nobody gave us permission to do that. We just did it. Now, we now have to essentially just go through a process, which is called the amendment process, which we're going to get into in a little while, which essentially is the governance around how change happens to the XRPL. But the principle I'm trying to get across to you is you haven't got to go and ask somebody's permission to make a change to the XRPL. You can do that change yourself, but you just have to go through the amendment procedure, which I will cover in probably the next 10-15 minutes.
Thanks, Chris. So just one final question, then Chris goes back to his presentation. So Abdul Jabbar, do you want to ask this question yourself, or do you want me to read it out? Quickly unmute yourself because of time, please. Okay, I'll just read it out. So Chris, there's a question that says, in cases where the dApp structure requires a token for transactions to occur, is it possible for the originating node to always receive a percentage for every transaction on the ledger?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay, cool. Chris, you could resume your presentation then.
Thank you. Right, so we've hit 8 o'clock now, which at my time, which is essentially an hour in now. I have this next section to get through, which I timed myself as 21 minutes. And I've still got a bunch of other stuff I wanted to go through. So the questions we've had have kind of cut somewhat into the time that I was going to spend. So you're going to have to
make Chris, that's fine. It's fine. Yeah. You can exhaust your presentation, and then we'll just do a Q&A afterwards.
Okay, that's fine.
We can brush away the guest lab. Nino and Evan will just help within that section.
Okay. Well, there's a whole bunch of different sections. So let's just try and get through the concepts, and we'll take questions at the end of that before I move on to the next section then?
All right, cool. No
Okay,
worries.
right.
All right, cool.
Let's talk core concepts of the XRPL, and we're going to start with infrastructure. So the XRP Ledger infrastructure as a distributed design, which means there's no single central authority governing the network. It relies instead on a distributed network of nodes that collaborate to maintain the network. As of Feb 24, there are over 800 nodes located at different points all around the world, and these make up the XRP Ledger network. At the heart of the XRP Ledger infrastructure is the RippleD server software, which is the core software that anyone can run to become part of the XRPL network. And there are different roles that a RippleD server can perform. These include a submission node, a validator, or a full history node. In short, a submission node handles the submission of transactions to the network for processing and inclusion in a ledger. A validator participates in the consensus process to agree and verify the validity of the transactions. And a full history server holds a copy of the entire history, providing a complete record of transactions that have ever been processed on the XRPL. Operators can host RippleD on their own hardware or cloud services, and the requirement for RippleD or running a RippleD server, it varies based on your intended role. Running a RippleD server requires engagement with the community to stay up to date with software updates called amendments. But we'll discuss that in a little more detail in a moment. The development and governance of the RippleD software is a collaboration between key stakeholders and developers from across the XRPL ecosystem. Contributors, improvements and discussions about the software's direction all take place on the official XRPL GitHub channel. But also they sometimes do spill out into other more public forums like Twitter and Discord. I'd love to talk more about you running your own infrastructure, but for the purpose of building an app on the test nets are actually perfectly fine. And there's also public infrastructure that you can use at the beginning. So I've taken the decision not to include any more detail about it now as a result of time constraints. However, if you are interested in learning more about infrastructure, as I said, my Udemy course has an entire module dedicated to the topic. So now I want to talk about consensus. Consensus in the context of blockchain and the XRP ledger specifically refers to the process by which a distributed network of nodes reach agreement on the validity.
Sorry, Chris, let me just mute all mics. There's somebody's mic that's on. Let me just mute all mics and then unmute yourself. All right, Chris, unmute yourself, please. Hello, Chris. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You must have muted me as well.
Yeah. I had to mute everybody and then was requesting you to bring yourself back.
Okay, I'll go back and
Okay, cool.
right. Okay, let's just start from the top. Consensus. Consensus in the context of blockchain and specifically the XRPL refers to the process by which a distributed network of nodes reach agreement on the validity and the ordering of the transactions. It's pretty simple, but it's also a vitally important concept. So I'm going to consider it with you with an example. So in a traditionalized, centralized payment system, the administrator of the system gets the final say in how and when payments occur. Because the XRP ledger is decentralized, it doesn't have that sort of central administrator that can do that. So instead, all participants follow an agreed set of rules, which ensures that every participant can agree on the exact same series of events and, importantly, the outcome at any point in time. And we call this we call this set of rules the XRP Ledger Consensus Protocol. Now, the protocol has the following important properties. Everyone who uses the XRP Ledger can agree on the latest state and which transactions have occurred in which order. All transactions are processed without needing a central operator or having any single point of failure. The ledger can make progress even if some participants join, leave, or behave inappropriately. If too many participants are unreachable or misbehaving, the network fails to make progress rather than diverging or confirming invalid transactions. And confirming transactions doesn't require wasteful or competitive use of resources, unlike most of the blockchain systems. And I'm referring mainly to proof of work there. So I've heard David Schwartz, David Schwartz, for anybody that doesn't know, is one of the original developers of the XRPL, and the history on my UDB course explains all of that. It's definitely worth reading up on that. But David Schwartz, he describes the consensus protocol in pretty simple terms. He says it's just the solution to the double spend problem, which is the challenge of preventing someone from successfully spending the same digital money twice. The hardest part about the problem is putting the transactions in order, because there's no single authority to which you can rely on. The consensus protocol defines the rules of the system for all to follow, and then through a series of something that which we call consensus rounds, the validators come to a consensus on the correct ordering. The time taken to achieve consensus does vary, and as does the number of rounds that are required, which is why the block time or the ledger block time is quoted as being between 3 to 5 seconds. And after that 3 to 5 seconds period, the ledger closes with finality. Okay, I've done that one as well. Right. So, don't worry if that's still a little foggy. For now, these are the key takeaways. Consensus is the XRP Ledger's solution to the double spend problem. And consensus is just a set of rules that all participants in the network must follow. Consensus is achieved through a series of rounds to reach agreement, and a new ledger is finalized through that consensus process approximately every 3 to 5 seconds. If you just remember those 4 things, that's enough for now. Ledgers. A lot of people would refer to these as blocks. I don't know why in the XRPL we call them ledgers, but we just do. It's just something that's always been the case. So the first thing to say is that we refer to them as ledgers. If you're coming from another blockchain, you should try and make a mental note, because when people say ledgers in the XRPL, they're referring to essentially what you would consider to be a block. And it's quite important when you start digging into the XRPL documentation, because it doesn't really mention blocks, it talks about ledgers. So it's something that does catch people out when they first jump into the XRPL. Every ledger version has an index number, and that's what we essentially did at the beginning when we wrote the code to pull it back, and it identifies the correct order of ledgers. It's essentially just a unique identifying hash, and at any given time the XRP ledger has a history of validated ledgers that are now immutable. There's an in progress open ledger which is having transactions submitted to it, and then it has a number of pending closed ledgers. A validated ledger is it's a ledger that has been through the consensus process, and it's therefore considered to be fully validated, and it's also immutable at that point. So once a ledger is closed, its contents, including all the transactions, all the account balances, they cannot be altered. Open ledgers represent the most recent set of transactions and account balances. This ledger is actively being updated as new transactions are processed. So The open ledger is open because it's still subject to change as new transactions are added and as they go through the consensus process. And a pending closed ledger is a state where transactions can no longer be added, but the consensus is yet to be reached. Therefore, it means it's not yet validated and therefore not immutable. At any time, there can be any number of ledgers in this state, although generally it's either going to be 0 or 1. Whilst in this state, nothing new can be added, but it is possible that the entire ledger could be replaced with a different version when you go through the consensus process. And this is something that you'll learn is quite important, understanding the importance of the state of the ledger. And I am going to talk about that a little bit more a bit later on. What's interesting, though, is that you can query the ledger to get transactions back in any of these states. In terms of the structure of a ledger, it consists of 3 parts. There's a header. Headers contain the ledger index, its hash, plus a hash of the parent ledger and a few other pieces of data. The transaction set contains all the transactions that occurred within the ledger, along with the metadata that shows exactly how the transaction was processed and how it affected the ledger state. And then you've got the state data, which represents a snapshot of all accounts, balances, settings, and other pertinent information as of that ledger version. Having the current ledger state available in the last validated ledger allows a node to be operated without having to have the entire full history. And that's a concept that will, become clearer as we discuss the different types of node operation. Right, accounts. Let's talk about accounts. An account plays an important role within the XRPL ecosystem. It's much more than just an address to send XRP or to receive XRP. To understand the role of an account, let's just start by looking at what makes up an account. It's got a public address, and that's what we refer to as an R address. It's got a balance of XRP because every account must have some XRP. A sequence number, which ensures that sent transactions are applied in the correct order and only once. And that is actually, when I talked about tickets earlier, that's where tickets actually come in and are very, very useful. You've also got a history of transactions that affected the account and its balances. You've got the authorization method, either a master key pair, regular key pair, or multi-signer list. And you've got a list of other ledger objects that the account owns. Right, where are we? Accounts. In the first instance, you're going to get an account by generating a master key pair and then sending some XRP to that address. You're either going to get that from another active wallet or an exchange where you purchase some XRP, or maybe from some other network participant. An account must contain some XRP. This is because to have an account on the XRP ledger, there is a real world cost. This is something I did say earlier. And this cost is known as a reserve. Once you have an account with enough XRP to meet the account reserve, your account is then considered to be activated and ready for use. So let's talk about reserves. The XRP ledger uses reserves as a form of spam prevention because there are 2 types of reserve. There's a base reserve and an owner reserve. The base reserve is the minimum amount of XRP that must be held in an account for it to be considered active and operational on the ledger. The reserve acts as a gatekeeper to prevent frivolous creation of accounts, as each new account must be funded to the base amount to be able to enter the ledger. The owner reserve is an incremental amount of XRP that's required for each object that the account owns in the ledger. And these objects include things like NFT pages, trust lines, open offers on the DEX, and many more things. The owner reserve grows with the number of objects that you hold. And again, it serves as a protective measure against spamming the ledger. It makes it costly to hold excessive numbers of objects on the XRP ledger. So Both types of reserves are locked until either the objects are removed in the case of owner reserves, or the account is deleted in the case of the base reserve. The exact amounts for the base reserve and the owner reserves are actually determined by network consensus, and this can change over time. In fact, it was only, I think it was the very early part of this year, that the validators voted to drop the price of the reserve of XRP from 10 to 1. That was done in sort of like recognition of the dramatic increase in price of XRP. Validators essentially participate in this through a fee voting process, and that's required in order to adjust the reserves on the network. Transactions. You know, a transaction is the only way to modify the XRP ledger. Transactions are only final if they're signed, submitted, and accepted into a validated ledger, which follows the consensus process. Some ledger rules also generate pseudo transactions which aren't signed or submitted but still accepted by consensus. Transactions that fail are also included in ledgers because they modify the balances of XRP to pay the anti-spam transaction cost known as the transaction fee. Transactions can do more though than just send XRP. You can change account settings such as rotating cryptographic keys. You could mint an NFT and then you could sell it. You could escrow your XRP. You could create a trust line to another account and then hold an issued asset such as like say a USD stablecoin. So to put this into terms you're more likely familiar with, a transaction type is essentially just a function on the ledger. We call a transaction, we pass it some data, and we expect a result. All transactions have their own defined payloads, but there are a number of fields which are common to all transactions, as well as transaction-specific fields. Right. To put this, hang on a second. I have red all over my screen for some reason. I don't know whether you're seeing that red.
We can see it. It's a markup tool. You can clear it. I just don't
obviously
remember
clicked
how.
something I shouldn't have done. Okay, never mind. Right, let's just talk about the 4 mandatory fields for any transaction. So there are 4 fields that are basically common and mandatory. Any transaction you submit to the XRPL is going to require an account. Basically, this refers to the account that's submitting the transaction. Then you've got the transaction type, which essentially is the type of transaction, you know, minting an NFT, creating a DEX offer, sending a payment. Think of the Xrp Ledger basically as an API with only one endpoint called submit transaction. So you call that function, and no matter what type of transaction you want, you just tell it what you want to do by using the transaction type. Then you have a fee. Every transaction requires a fee, and essentially that fee is charged in XRP. It's a very small amount, but it's usually measured in drops. But essentially that fee gets burned by the network as a cost of the transaction. It's basically the way the XRPL protects itself against spam. You can't just send a million transactions to the XRPL and expect it to be free. Every single transaction will have a cost. However, the cost is significantly lower than other networks. And then lastly, you have a sequence number. So the sequence number is the sequence number of the account sending the transaction. You may remember that every account has a sequence number, and that's basically to prevent transactions from being applied in the wrong order or applied multiple times. A transaction's only valid if the sequence number provided is exactly 1 greater than the account's last recorded sequence number. Okay, this is a little bit more technical now, but this plays into this idea of tickets. You know, the one exception to that rule is you can pass 0, but that is basically as a result of the ticket amendment, and it's probably beyond the scope of this explanation. But what tickets will do is allow you to essentially reserve space on the ledger and then at a later point go back and submit them in a different order. Now, there are other common fields, such as flags, memos, last in ledger sequence, and a few others. We'll get into all of those, as well as other specific fields for each transaction type in due course. Transactions also always yield a result. Okay, the RippleD server summarizes these with result codes, and they're on the screen for you right now. You're looking for tech success. Tech success basically, test success is the result that we all want to see, because that basically means that your transaction was successful. However, if you recall when I talked about ledger state, a test success response only confirms that the transaction seeded. To know that it's actually applied, you must make sure that that is actually included in a validated ledger. Along with the result code, you're going to receive metadata, which includes detailed information about how the transaction was processed. And this might include stuff like the transaction ID, ledger index, some transaction data, a node. You might get a list of affected nodes, and that would be a good example of that, like a detailed list of the ledger objects that were created, deleted, or modified as a result of your transaction. Transactions are a key concept, so what I've done is try to give you a succinct summary now. So transactions are the sole means to alter the Xrp ledger and include various types such as payments and account setting changes, each with a set of common and type specific fields, and they must be signed, submitted, and accepted into a validated ledger to be final, with outcomes detailed in the results codes and the metadata that we just discussed. I need to talk a little bit about fees. The Xrp ledger imposes fees to protect the network. They are just a small transaction cost that essentially prevents spam. And they do that by destroying a tiny amount of Xrp with each transaction. These fees are often referred to as neutral fees because they're charged by the protocol and they're a cost of using the network. Fees are set at the protocol level by the validators in the same way as they set the reserves, and essentially they allow the network to change to evolving conditions. And fee escalation, again, is a topic I won't go into now. It's probably outside the scope of a beginner fundamentals lesson, but fee escalation can happen when essentially too many transactions are attempted in a single ledger, and that's one of the ways the network will protect itself is it will increase its fees to price out certain transactions, allow the network to calm down, and then everybody's transactions will start to flow through again once the congestion eases. The Xrp ledger also allows for the implementation of optional fees. These are fees that the users levy for a variety of reasons, such as trust loan quality or transfer fees. These optional fees are user defined and they're not actually required by the protocol itself. And there is, according to the documentation, a third classification of fee, and it's referred to as off-ledger fees, where basically it's where the fees applied to transactions by third-party software. So maybe a wallet provider, marketplace, or some kind of DApp wants to directly apply a fee for the use of their software. It's important to note, though, that only neutral fees are mandatory. Optional fees, whilst they're implemented at the protocol level, they can be set by users, such as issuers of ledger assets, and off-ledger fees are charged by businesses who are using the ledger and essentially charging you a fee in addition to the protocol fee for the use of their applicational service. Right, let's talk a little about the role of XRP. XRP performs a dual role within the XRP Ledger ecosystem. So first, it helps to secure the network by being used as a transaction fee and account reserve. This works because the XRP has real world value. Therefore, there's an actual real cost for each transaction or object that you hold on the ledger. When you scale this and factor in fee escalation, which is the concept we just talked about, you'll learn as you progress through the course, you'll see how fees play an important role in securing the network. Thus, you recognize XRP's first use case. XRP is a volatile asset. In other words, its value is not pegged to any other asset. Its value fluctuates based on demand, which means it can therefore be traded for other things of value at both ends of a transaction. And there's a number of companies using XRP in their tech stack, and there's none more prominent than Ripple, who use XRP as a form of bridge currency. I'm not going to be going into the merits of Ripple's business model today, but suffice to say that by using XRP, their customers can move money from one side of the world to the other with finality in a matter of minutes for way, way less than the current system. If you're interested in more about Ripple's sort of like use of XRP, I'd recommend that you check out their website. I've personally been paid in XRP. I've used it to buy things. I've held it for speculative purposes, and I've also used it to pay other developers. So, to echo my opening statement, the XRP performs a dual role of both securing the network as a transaction fee and as a means of value exchange. Right, amendments. This is going to be an important one, especially for the person that asked about the way in which we change the ledger. Amendments are the mechanism used to enhance or fix issues within the core XRPL software Ripple D. When the XRP Ledger launched, there was actually no formal method for updating it, but in 2014, a new process, which we refer to as the amendment process, was introduced, and it brought with it a much more formalized process. So an amendment starts, or it usually starts off as a discussion on GitHub, and it'll eventually turn into a formal proposal coded with an XLS number. A proposal can come from anyone, but you must include the detailed specification of the proposed change. You must include its rationale and the potential benefits to the network. The proposal then enters a formal phase of discussion and feedback where participants, including developers and validators and other stakeholders, they're going to review that proposal, ask questions, provide input, just to ensure that there's been a thorough evaluation of that changed process. After gathering the feedback and refining the proposal must then essentially create an implementation of the amendment. This amendment will then be thoroughly tested to ensure it's compatible with existing code bases and to ensure that any potential issues or vulnerabilities are found. Eventually, with enough network support, the new feature makes its way into a new version of Ripple D and is put forward as an amendment. To be activated on the network, there are several steps that need to be satisfied. Sufficient network support. Validators that run the Ripple D software must upgrade to the new version that includes the proposed amendment. If a node doesn't upgrade, it runs the risk of being amendment blocked, which basically just means it's no longer going to be able to participate in consensus because it doesn't have the latest version of code. Voting. Voting basically once the validators upgraded their code to the latest version, they're going to vote on the amendments, and basically they're going to say yes we want this, or no we don't. Each new version of Ripple D comes with a list of known amendments, and then the operators of Ripple D basically configure their servers to vote accordingly on each amendment. And importantly, every validator gets its own vote, and there is an actual governance process around how many votes are required in order to essentially make that amendment live. And that basically is that the amendments must maintain a minimum of 2 weeks continued support from more than 80% of the trusted validators to be enabled on the network. And if that support drops below 80%, the amendment is basically temporarily rejected, and then the whole 2-week process has to restart again once it reaches the 80% majority. And what it does is it basically makes for a pretty robust and a very decentralized ability to control the network. No one individual party can make a change to the XRPL. It has to have the buy-in from 80% plus of all of the trusted UNL. I just quickly want to talk about amendment blocking, which I kind of very briefly just touched on.
Chris,
Yeah.
quick question. How much more do you have to go? Because we have to do the Q&A because the session ends at 9 sharp. So you have about 25 minutes.
I've got about 2 or 3 minutes left of this section.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. So amendment blocking, right? This is what happens when a new amendment goes live into a specific version of RippleD, and then a node that's running on an older version essentially can no longer participate because it doesn't have the latest version of code, and therefore it doesn't understand transactions that are coming in because it doesn't have the code there to essentially understand what that transaction is supposed to do. The good news is, to fix it, all you have to do is just upgrade your validator to the latest version. You become unblocked, and then you continue to participate in the consensus process. And the last one is client libraries. This is quite an important one because when building on the Xrp Ledger, developers often leverage client libraries just to interact with the network more efficiently and effectively. Client libraries are packages or modules that abstract the complexities of the raw API calls into easy to use functions and methods that can be directly integrated into your application code. And they generally do this in a way that's in keeping with the native conventions of the respective programming language that you're going to use. So I favor JavaScript, and I use the JavaScript SDK when I build, but the Xrp Ledger supports SDKs for JavaScript, Python, C++, Java, PHP, Ruby, Go. I think there's an unofficial .NET, C#.NET as well. So there's lots of choices. To build on the Xrp Ledger, you don't have to be a C++ developer. You don't have to be JavaScript. You could come and build something on the XRPL, and you could use Python, and that would be no problem at all. So by using one of these libraries, you can focus more on your application rather than the intricacies of directly interacting with the raw XRPL. So we've reached the natural stopping point, and for whatever reason, we don't have, I don't think, enough time for me to get through the next section that I wanted to. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip to sort of what would have been my closing for the lecture, and I'll roll the bits that have not been able to have gone through now into the next session. It's a shame because these next few sections we're actually going to get a little bit more hands-on. We were going to do a bit more in terms of code, VS Code and stuff like that. I was going to show you how to create an account in code and stuff like that, but we'll get to that at the next lecture. So I'm just going to skip ahead now to essentially where we would have been at the end. Yeah. Right, so there's not really a whole lot that I wanted to say to wrap up, but essentially I wanted to say thanks. We've reached kind of like the point where we have to stop in order to meet the finishing time. When we do the next lecture, we are going to jump more into code. It's unfortunate, really, because I know there'll be devs out there who just want to see code, but some of the stuff that I've gone over today is going to play massive dividends to you when you actually come to build, because you're going to find the building is the really easy part. Writing the code for this is easy. Understanding why that code needs to be written the way it does, that's far more difficult. But you're going to find that what I've given you is a really good grounding, and it's going to pay a lot of dividends for you as you move forward. So I hope that you've enjoyed the lecture. I know it was probably more theory intensive than I would have liked. If I'd done the last 20 minutes, you would have had a bit more exciting stuff to end on. But we are where we are. I thank you for listening. I hope you found the lecture informative. And if I may just say one final time, if you're interested in learning more about the XRPL, you'll find that the Udemy course will give significantly more detail that's important to you to know. So I'd recommend that you go and give that a little bit of a look. There's a number of lectures that you can watch for free before you jump in. And if you are interested, for the next 4 days, you're never going to get a better price. It's the lowest price that Udemy will allow me to sell it at. It comes out at $11.99. Visit Udemy, search for XRP Ledger Bootcamp, and use the code XRPL365 at checkout. And if anybody wants to reach out to me with, maybe you need a bit of help or a bit of advice, or, maybe you want to know the location of other resources or whatever, follow me on Twitter at XRPL365, and I'll be happy to try and put you on the path to your journey into the XRPL. So thank you very much.
All right, Chris, don't disappear. We still need you. So potentially you could stop your slide share for now.
Yeah.
And then guys, Nino, Evan. Hey, our Evan. We can't see you today. Palesa.
Not looking particularly pretty at the moment.
Come on, Evan. Put on the camera if you're able to.
Well, I'm currently sitting here with a rather nasty dose of shingles, which is exceptionally painful. And yeah, so I don't look particularly great either. So you can't look much worse than me today.
Yeah.
Well, you're looking great for having shingles, I'll say that.
Well, yeah, that's what codeine does for you.
Can you get shingles more than once?
Yes, it's my second time. It's
Yo,
horrible.
guys, focus.
Well, thank you, Chris. I do appreciate the lesson. I didn't know anything about XRPL, and now I know barely anything. I feel like there's so many questions I had. I didn't want to interrupt your
I know. I do appreciate for anybody that's new to it. I've literally just crammed 4 hours of material into your brain in 75 minutes. So
Yeah.
it's a lot, and it's definitely worth going back and re-listening to some of it. But like I say, in the Udemy course, it's slightly more slower paced because I haven't got to shoehorn it in, and there's also things I've had no choice but to skip over, which are also quite useful to know.
Yeah. So oh, go ahead. No.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, I'm gonna open up the floor to to the class. So whoever has questions, they can turn on their mics and in sequence rather, in an orderly manner, ask questions. But Nino, back to you.
So a lot of our students are from Africa, right? So this is directed at Chris. So when you have a system like XRPL where you actually have to buy the XRPL to start interacting with the network, or some way of acquiring it, what or how would you recommend these students who don't have banking institutes? We're working with farmers who are not even smartphone enabled. It's like, I know that there's going to be very large markets that we're going to be missing if we're using XRPL. So what would you suggest for maybe the younger farmers, like we learned about yesterday, who do have mobile phones? How would you bring them into the community? What methods exist right now that you would think would be good for our students to get users onto the network? How do we gain this adoption for these? It's a terrible question. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. It's a chicken and egg problem. And the XRPL has a high barrier to entry, which is looked on negatively. But once you're over that barrier, the cost of transacting is cheaper than almost anywhere. And it's also significantly faster than many of the other alternatives. So yeah, you can spin up an Ethereum address for free and give it someone, and then you can hook it to a DApp and they're on the network. But then they want to do something, and suddenly you're going to get hit with like $1 just to send one transaction. with the XRPL, it's an upfront cost. So the upfront cost is going to be at today's price is $2, $2.50 to get going. But once you're up and running, you could be sending thousands of transactions
Well,
for
that's good to know.
a
So
fraction of a cent.
for our students who will have to identify a problem in the community and come up with a solution with it, I would just suggest then that you have a solution that includes where is this fee coming from. That's if you decide to use XRPL. We'll have other, chains come on and present and everything like that. But if you decide XRPL is the chain you want to have those cheaper transactions after you have the users. Build that into your pitches. Consider that price point, that higher point of entry.
The way I
And
consider it is as a kind of like it's a cost of customer acquisition, right? So you may have to spend an amount of money to acquire that customer. Would build it into the cost of acquiring the customer. And the beautiful thing about it is that this is an ecosystem. So once Project A onboards this customer, they're a customer for the entire ecosystem. That cost is only paid once. So once you get everybody in account, right? Everybody's got an account for any project that they want to use on it. So then everybody gets the benefit of that user, and then everybody gets the benefit of these super low fees and super fast transactions. So there are creative ways in which projects can come together to try and onboard mass numbers of users in order to be able to try and tackle this problem. Also, if you've got a project that is going to be doing essentially volume on the network, transactional volume on the network, there are grants available from different net people in the network, and there are mechanisms where you could apply. You can ask for the grant to be in any form that you want. Most people ask for grants in order to be able to pay for the development of a project, but there's no reason why you couldn't ask for a grant that said we would really like, 1,000 XRP, so we could create 1,000 accounts to give to 1,000 users, which essentially lets you onboard 1,000 customers to your business at zero cost. And you could potentially try and do something whereby you could have that put in place. It's about being creative and not looking at it as too much of a barrier, but get creative about how you can do that. You could also have projects come together and share that cost. There are ways around it if you get creative. But the way I've always looked at it is it's beneficial in the long run, because when you get, especially if you're talking about relatively small amounts of money that you're transferring, if you're transferring say $5 worth of value from point A to point B, and it's going to cost you $1 in transaction fees, it makes the transaction unaffordable. But on the XRP ledger, you could move any amount of value and the amount of money is measured in, it's essentially six decimals of 1 cent. So 0.00001 of a cent is what it costs to actually transfer the value. So it pays off in spades when you really get to the massive number of transactions that you're putting through the network. At that point, the account reserve really pays dividends.
Thanks, Chris. There's a question here. Are there other use cases for XRP apart from finance? So in terms of things like utility, RWA, is XRP able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when you look at the features of the XRPL, it's way more than a payments network. RWA is something that's being pushed massively now by the major players in the ecosystem, and Ripple in particular are very interested in RWA. This idea of tokenization is huge. There's loads of new amendments coming in the pipeline to support that. DeFi protocols are really there's a lot of interest in DeFi. We have the NFT standard available, so there are plenty of projects out there that are building projects around NFT standards. So yeah, it's not just a payments network, but of course payments is what it's most well known for, and that is because of the speed and the low cost
Right. There's a question here from Francis. Uh, is there a limit to the number of XRP that are available on the network? I'm guessing he's a Bitcoin guy, so potentially trying to understand that.
Say that again. Is there a number of?
So like how Bitcoin has a maximum of like 21 million tokens,
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So he's asking whether XRP has a limit on the number of XRP available on the network.
Yeah. Okay. So it's difficult you can't compare Bitcoin and XRPL in those terms because they work differently.
Yeah.
When the XRP ledger was created, it was created with essentially 100 billion XRP on day one. And the protocol prevents the creation of more. So there will never be more than 100 billion XRP. And it's naturally deflationary because
Yeah.
every single time you do a transaction, it burns a small amount of XRP. So I think it's 99 point something billion XRP that exists today because millions of XRP have effectively been destroyed so far in the transactions that it's already gone ahead and done.
Okay, cool. What are the other upcoming updates or features planned for the XRPL ecosystem from Folabi, that is?
I touched on a few of them. I mean, the credentials proposal is actually up for voting right now. That's really interesting. Dynamic NFTs, that's on the board for voting as well. Um, there's some interesting proposals around loans protocol. Um, there's a whole bunch of DeFi stuff. There's a load of stuff that's been talked about with regards to sort of compliance, permission domains. The best thing to do actually for anybody that's interested is you can see all of them. So if you go to GitHub and go to the XRPLF, which is the official GitHub repository for Ripple, Ripple D, the source code, then you can go and you can see all the proposals that are on there that have been proposed by different developers from all around the world. And you'll find 4 of mine on there as well.
All right, cool. Thanks, Chris. Now, we have a mixture of students here. So we have the devs and the newbies. So, guys, I want to give you a chance to turn on your mics and regardless of your level of understanding, like, if there's something you got, your takeaway from today, or if you didn't understand something, Chris is here. So before we move to the next session next week, yeah, which is going to be kind of more hands-on, is there anything that you needed clarification on? This is your chance to get that sorted out. So you can just unmute yourself. Hello, yeah, so do it radio style. Yo, who's this? You know what I mean? Like, yo, what's your name? Like,
yeah.
What's up, man?
Okay, yeah, this gets from Nairobi, Kenya, and I have one
Yo,
question.
Nairobi in the hizzy.
Yeah, really, thank you so much.
Yeah,
so I really, it's really been bothering me throughout the meeting, and I understand that the validator consensus in XRP relies on the unique node list, or rather the UNLS. And this defines like the trusted validators, which actually validate transactions and reach a consensus for each and every few seconds. So I wanted to ask, like, can anybody participate in the network the same way probably you can participate in the POW or the POS in Ethereum and Bitcoin? That was like really my question. And I wanted to get an understanding on that consensus mechanism. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. So yes, anybody can run their own node. You can run a node in different formats. So you can run a submission node. The reason you would do that is probably because you are going to be building something and you want to submit transactions to the network. Therefore, it makes more sense for you to be using your own hardware to do that. So that's what's called a submission node. The value that you get from running that node is the fact that you're submitting via your own infrastructure. So you're going to get better performance. You get full control over that node as well. You're not going to get rate limited by any public infrastructure. And there's just a natural incentive for you to do that for yourself. You can run a validator. Anybody can run a validator. I run one. And essentially what you're doing is you're just contributing to the network. You contribute to the security of the network. But in order to be on the UNL, you essentially have to make your way onto that list. To get on that list is something that you have to be invited to do. It's it's kind of like you need to prove that you're a good operator, and that happens by basically just joining, running a good validator, having good uptime, and then getting yourself noticed, participating in the conversations on GitHub, giving your views on things and getting noticed. And if you do that, you will one day you'll be invited to be part of that network, because the UNL is all about trusted entities. So you want people that have got a proven history and a proven track record of doing a good job to be on that list. And last is the full history server. And the only real reason you would run that is if you're a big project and you want to contribute back to the network, or you're running some kind of system where you genuinely going to want to have access to the full history and it just makes sense. Now, there's no incentive, financial incentive for anybody to run a node. It's not like with Bitcoin where you're mining, you're trying to essentially extract value from the network. It's not like proof of stake with Ethereum where you're getting paid for staking Ethereum, as running a validator. Essentially, with the XRPL, there is no incentive. There is only cost. So on average, it would cost you probably $50 a month to run just an average node that would be able to participate in the network. So the incentive for running infrastructure for the XRPL is not financial. The incentive is essentially you're part of the network. You probably have a business built on it. You want to see the network secured. You want to see it continue to be viable. It's a totally different mindset to other blockchains, and it's one that is the subject of many debates. There's a famous saying in the XRP Ledger community, and it's called "the best incentive is no incentive." And if you ever get a chance to Google that and then watch some of the videos on it, it's fascinating hearing all the different opinions. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
All right, cool, Chris. There's a question from Maka Yusuf, but I want to pick on somebody. Eugene Mutumbe. Wait, Murume, what's up, man? Any questions from you? And I see Ethiopia, Gitom, and Abubakar Umar. Any questions from you guys? I'm just trying to pick different parts of Africa and different parts of Kenya. So Miriam Jerry, what's up? Maka Yusuf, back to you, please.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. My question is, if we have only, let's mention around 800 validators for users that are over 3 million, my question is that fair to the 3 million people, 800 people taking decision for an over 3 million people? And why are users not allowed to vote for the amendments, only validators?
Well, it's the network is the network is basically operated by nodes on a tiered based system. Okay, so submission nodes don't get to vote, right? If voting on it is what you want, then you need to be running a validator. And technically, a validator can vote on any amendment, but only votes from the UNL actually count towards the decision-making process of that 80% that I talked about. And essentially, just the way in which the Ripple D protocol works, it essentially works on a form of trust. So it's UNL. You have to be on that UNL in order to vote, and getting on it is not a simple process. You have to essentially prove your commitment to the network over a number of years, and prove yourself to be reliable and a good actor. And effectively, there are some very technical reasons if you want to get into the documentation as to how that can prevent certain types of attack, but it's probably not something to really get into right now.
It's actually quite easy to explain. So if you have 3 million users and you only need $3 essentially to make an account, you could just overpower the network with just a monetary amount, change it how you want to do it, and then you could actually extract all the value out of it if you were nefarious. So I'm saying
Yeah.
that it actually makes sense to have less validators, less voters from a security standpoint, simply because someone with $5 million just shows up, steals the network, takes all the money out of it, and then it would be worthless. It could be worthless.
Yeah, and that can't happen in theory. Is improbable because
Yeah,
one person coming in with a load of money to do that wouldn't be enough. They would have to take control of more than 80% of the entire network. And that network is essentially made up of people that have proven over years and years that they're reliable. So it becomes robust by its design. And the longer the network lives, and that essentially continues to secure that network. So yeah,
yeah,
and also a practical thing. You don't want to be waiting around for millions of people to decide whether or not they want something. What you want is you've got this relatively small list of people that are incentivized in as much as they want to do the job, right? And when they get presented with this like request, we want to put this on the network. Their job's not just to sit there and decide do they like it. They have to go and they have to review code bases and they have to look at the changes. They have to test the proposals, make sure that the code actually works as it's meant to. They're effectively like the last line of defense against a developer sneaking something in that's nefarious or a developer just making a general bug mistake. It's just an additional layer of security on the network, and you would only want to trust that to people that have already proven themselves to care enough to spend thousands of dollars a year running infrastructure for the network for no cost.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for that. So there's a message that just came in here from Miriam Njeri. Hi everyone, I'm pretty getting some content. Yeah, so she's getting it, but she's hoping for a simplified or rather broken down version of all this. So Miriam, don't worry. It's day one. It's been a 2 hour session. You can't get everything. Rome wasn't built in a day. Just take your time with this. You can reach out to yes, day one, Miriam. So you can reach out to Chris on LinkedIn or his email or follow him and his Udemy course. And you can talk to us if you need some support in terms of paying for that Udemy course as well. Like we are really just gonna take on the serious people. So if you're serious about knowledge and serious about taking this to the next level, we can have conversations with Chris to see how we can support the serious ones regarding taking those courses. So yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, right, Nino?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think that what I want to say the same thing that I said in the beginning is again, this is you got a very um a very specific view right now, right? And we haven't gone over all the theory, we haven't even gone over the ideathon, we haven't gone over a lot of the more basic concepts between blockchain and interacting with the network and like the global economy, I mean. So you're going to have days that are theory-based days. You're going to have days that have nothing to do with blockchain. You're going to have days where we're talking about LinkedIn and smart goals. And you just it's don't be intimidated by this day one. This is just XRPL and explaining how that works. So you can start formulating the exposure. You're just getting exposed to these concepts. It's like uh, for me, I love learning languages. It's my hobby. Sometimes I just listen to the language, understand none of it, and it helps my brain grasp it. A lot of today for the non-developers, that's what this was, I imagine. But for me, this was a good day. I was able to grasp a lot of the concepts. I appreciate Chris for coming out and educating us. I think it was Chris, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right. I thought I messed up your name for a second there. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. But no, it was really good. I
Yeah, Chris,
appreciated
that
this
was excellent. Yeah.
because Brian and I talk every day almost, and he tells me he's like, oh, XRPL Commons is doing this and XRPL is doing this, and I'm like, I don't know anything about that blockchain. And so it was good to actually finally see the face, I guess, to understand the concepts behind it and why there's proponents for it. So I see
leave
the
you
utility.
with one final point, which you've kind of led me into really nicely, which is the XRP Ledger is really good choice for some things.
Yeah.
It's not a blockchain for everyone. There is going to be use cases which were more suited to Ethereum or some other blockchain. But for certain use cases, the XRP Ledger on a completely level playing field, the XRP Ledger will absolutely win. And if you're a developer, the golden rule is you should use the technology that does the best job. Use the right tool for the job. So in order to move into Web3, you need to know what all your options are, and the XRP Ledger needs to be in your back pocket. And when you come up with a use case with a client and they say, it would be great, we need to do X, Y, Z, you go, the XRPL is really good at that. I know a little bit about that. I'll go and dig into it. But if you don't even know it exists, you don't even know to consider it as an option. And so if all I've done today is help people recognize what the XRPL is and what value it can offer to people, then I consider that to be a job well done.
Yeah, and just to watch the clock, I just wanted Palesa, Palesa last year she was sat in the same position as all the other students are in right now, but Palesa is one of us at Blockchain Lex group now. Just to give you guys an idea of moving from just learning the basics to applying yourself in real life. You don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a dev. You can have an idea and have coders and devs like Chris supporting you. So Palesa, you just want to share with the class briefly your journey and how being in this cohort transformed you to the person you are now and your shifting scholarship moving forward as well, you know what I mean?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. I am Palesa from Lesotho. And I would like to share with you that I was part of you just a year ago. I was sitting right where you're sitting, and I had no idea about so many things. And yes, it might be discouraging sometimes when you don't understand these technical terms, but I will encourage you to always, always prepare before you come to class so that every time when people like Chris are talking about this technical terms, you probably have an idea. So one thing that I will encourage you guys to do is that in as much as you might be finding these things technical and new to you, but believe me, our minds work in an amazing way, because in the next few months, you'll be surprised when you know a few things and you're like, how did I even know these things? You see? So don't ever undermine what you're learning today, because in the next future, they'll come in handy. So I just have a legal background. I didn't know much about blockchain, or yeah, basically I didn't know much about blockchain, but today I'm sitting here and telling you that I know so much. I know so much because of this boot camp. It has actually opened my mind so much, because at this time, I can tell you that I'm able to recognize problems within my community, you see, and I'm able to even come up with solutions. And I don't necessarily need to have this coding basics. I can just call my FieldWork people and tell them, hey, I think I have an idea here. I think I have a way to, I have an idea. So how about we work on this? You see, so you don't necessarily need to know all these things. We have this community. You are now part of us, and you can actually use this community to benefit you and your community. So welcome again to the No Loan Team Bootcamp.
Yeah.
Please stay with us, and we love you guys to stay here. And believe me, we're an awesome community, and you're gonna love us.
Thank you, Palesa.
Thank you, Brian. Back to you.
Now speaking of Chris, just before I let you go, actually, Chris, do you have a last takeaway before I tell them what they should be expecting tomorrow?
No, I was just going to say, if there's one thing we need more of in this space than developers, it's lawyers that understand blockchain. So I'm all for bring more, you don't have to be a developer, just having that fundamental understanding of blockchain, even no matter what your career, is going to eventually pay dividends. And, so don't be put off just because the code looks a bit foreign and alien to you. There are people out there that understand it, and you can partner with them and do some great stuff together. You just need the fundamentals, which you've had a good start today, even though you've been chucked in the deep end. Good start, and good luck to everybody with the remainder of the course.
All
And
right,
people would join me next week for a bit more of a deeper dive.
Hey, Chris, hold up before you jump off. Someone was asking about how to get grants for XRPL as a developer or something like that. I can't remember the exact question. Do you just want to touch on that, or should we touch on that next week? Because I'm just about to talk about money right now.
XRPL grants, just go to Google, type in XRPL grants, okay, and you'll find the official website, and everything you need to know is on there. You can apply at any time, and yeah, if you're going to go for a grant, you need to have a good idea and you need to have a small team. So you're not going to get a grant because you've got an idea for something. You're going to get a grant if you've got an idea for something, you've got a plan for how you're going to deliver it, and you've got at least one developer that's committed to working with you to delivering it. They don't fund ideas, they fund projects. So go with a rounded idea that's good and a team that can deliver it, and you stand a good chance.
So the Ideathon, actually, that is what the Ideathon
That's
is.
what the Ideathon is going to be about. We're helping them get to that sort of structure. So,
Right.
guys, before we jump off,
deal.
tomorrow we're going to be speaking about money. So tomorrow we have our other partners. We have Blockchain Sensei, who also have a sister agency known as Foundation Ventures. So Blockchain Sensei tomorrow will be bringing the ecosystem together. They'll be discussing blockchain, smart contracts, AI agents, and the whole shebang. You have it in the timetable, and they'll also be introducing you to the world of venture capitalism. So if you want money, sometimes VCs talk about fund ideas, so you don't have to have a project per se, but it has to be a really impeccable idea. So tomorrow's session is going to deal with that. So don't miss out. Don't be discouraged, guys. This thing goes up and down like this. But at the end of it, you'll be like, yeah, this is what it is, okay? So don't think about get rich quick schemes, don't think about all that trading kind of stuff. We are teaching you utility and real world applications. So thank you very much, Chris. Big up yourself. Thank you for your time. Nino, big up yourself. Valessa, big up yourself. And everybody, literally, big up yourselves. Gonna see you tomorrow. We're gonna link up in the WhatsApp. If you have any questions or need clarifications, just inbox me in my WhatsApp, or Nino or Palesa, or admin@blockchainlex.io, or admin@fifthwork.io. Nino, or is it
No,
.com?
.com. Yeah.
.com.
At fifthwork.com. Yeah.
All right, cool. So you have all those links. Just go percolate, let it sip down and chill out. Yeah. So link up tomorrow. I'll at you later. All right. Bye-bye, guys.